Sure.
Welcome back to Venchon Denchon, my YouTube channel. And here we go. I'm super excited that my guest today is none other than my friend, teacher, mentor, life inspiration, amazing person, Håkan Hardenberger. Håkan, welcome to the channel and delighted that you're here.
Oh, thank you very much, Jeff.
Now, I have a bunch of questions that I've thought of, and I want to talk a little bit about the way it was for me learning from you. But what I like to start with is in your career, which I was thinking about it. I think you've been you've been a soloist now for, it must be 37 or 38 years coming up since you burst onto the scene. Some of the really memorable concerts and why they're memorable to you.
Oh God, it's hard to pick concerts. I think it depends on when you start counting, but I would say it's 40 years actually, because I think when I finished in Paris, and then there was really already the first concerts, and I mean, one of the most important, I have to say, was even before that, because that was after the Munich competition. I had, competitions are what they are, and we sort of get to know who we are and learning many pieces at a time and all these things. But then after the Munich competition, there was one invitation to go and play in Berlin, in the Philharmonie, in the whole Philharmonie, but with the then called, I think, the DSO radio orchestra, right? And it was kind of a young soloist concert on a Sunday morning, but it was in that amazing hall, and I so vividly remember taking the decision, just after the cadenza of the first movement, absolutely taking this decision. This is definitely, if I had any doubt that this was what I was going to do in my life, that moment was when I said, yes, this is what I'm doing. Because the feeling of that acoustic of the great hall, where you get a second instrument, and all what you practice, and you think it sounds horrible when you throw it out in the hall, and it comes back beautiful to you. And there was a lot of people, and they were actually quiet, and they were listening to me. And I mean, that's definitely the moment where I got the poison for real. I mean, I had the ambition, and I had the dreams, and but that made the coming years, then, when we had no money, and I had doubts that it was even possible to be a trumpet soloist, not playing too many transcription and not doing the la music. I had those doubts, but a moment like that, when you really feel, yes, this is it. So then, some years ago, when I think at the tender age of 55 or so, I made my debut with the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. That was, of course, a parallel, because then coming back to that orchestra, to the hall, but with that orchestra, with the H.K. Gruber aerial repertoire written for me, and it was Gruber and then Mahler 5, proper program, and have the trumpet play in that circumstance. I mean, that was a nice feeling too. So if I single out a couple of concerts, those are a good parallel and a good picture.
And nice bookends as well. So was Munich in 1980 or 81, or was it, when was Munich?
I think probably 1980.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the Maurice Andre Competition was in 79. I had only been, a year at school, and Thibaud said, well, why don't you just prepare the pieces of the first round? And lo and behold, I ended up in the final, where the Jolivet was on the program, and he looked at me, have you played the Jolivet? I said, no. He said, we have 5 days.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that was in 79. Then it was Munich in 80, I think. And then I think it was Toulon in 81, same year as I finished in Paris.
Do you know, I think what will be really interesting is how did it go from this concert in Berlin where you're playing, you're playing, it was Haydn, I guess. What was the process from there to when, I guess by the time I met you, I think it was 88, it was 89, and you were in Sydney, you were coming to Australia, you'd already done a couple of the records with Philips, the Virtuoso Trumpet had come out. By then you were in full swing. You were, the career was going. So what was the process to get from wondering, could it be done, to actually not just knowing it could be done, but having set yourself on this path that you've continued?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm pretty single-minded, as you know, and and on the stubborn side, and there was also so many things that I had learned from Thibaud, and then a little later Tom, but mostly a lot of things that I sort of understood from my years with Thibaud, but that I still I couldn't do it. So I knew I needed the time to do it. And so that was one of the decisions, not to go into an orchestra straight away, because I just realized that if I want to give that a chance, all those things that I thought I will be able to do that, but I can't do it now, then I needed the time. And in those days we had to do military service here, and I went back to do that so that I could enter the country again. And during that time there was an audition for the Stockholm Philharmonic, and I sent in the papers, and then Claes, because we had no money, and I mean, so Claes Strömblad of the orchestra, he phoned me and he said, well, is that really what you want to do? Because we don't want anyone here who doesn't want to be here. And I thought about it, and I said, no, you're absolutely right. It's probably not what I want to do. And so there were important moments like that. And also, I played around the same time, I think also 81, with the first time with the local orchestra here, the Malmö Orchestra, and conductor was Elgar Howarth.
Aha.
So, and then we started to talk, and I talked to him about how I wanted to build a repertoire of contemporary music, of substantial, good music. And that was, of course, him being a modernist and a composer. And so music to his ears. Also, after that concert, I got my first agency, the Swedish Lodding Agency, which is an important step. And Gary Howarth having all these connections to contemporary composers, Birtwistle, Henze, it started that path. And Henrik Lodding, the impresario, he was really of the old school. I mean, someone described him, he looks like he owns 7 circuses. He had a Rolex, one Rolex on each arm, and he drove a Rolls Royce. And me and Heidi, young couple, we walk up to his house hand in hand, and he says, well, if you come to me, it will be like this and this and this. First you will play with this type of orchestra, then with this. And in those days, if you could deliver, that was actually what happened. I mean, that was the luxury of belonging to that generation. And because I now I don't envy the young ones coming out now. And also through Gary Howarth, and there was one concert in London at the Crystal Palace concerts. It's like an outdoor, a bit like Hollywood Bowl, and I played his concerto. And the next day it's like out of some magazine, the next day I had auditions with EMI and Philips. And
yeah, right.
So, and then I had a record contract suddenly.
Had you already recorded the Virtuoso Trumpet by then?
No, when I recorded that, I had the Philips contract, but I didn't say anything.
I just want to just to say, when the virtue in Australia, first of all, Christian's the Virtuoso Trombone came out, and then shortly after, I mean, when the Virtuoso Trumpet came out, I think it was like, to us, and I'm sure all around, it was like a smack in the head. It was like, this is what the trumpet can actually do. Wake up. That's how it felt to all of us. Well, it was wake up and don't do anything, because we didn't really know what to do, but we knew it was something different, something. And so that for us was an announcement. But you hadn't done that when you already got when you got the Philips contract.
No, I hadn't. No,
right.
I mean, it was in the process, and I was practicing all these pieces, and I was dying to make a record. I really was longing to make a record. And you mentioned another important person, Christian Lindberg, because we sort of at the same time took the decision. Well, we have to give it the chance at least until we're 30. Then, you know, don't give in and keep pushing for it. So he was another important person you take the elevator with. So no, I hadn't done, and it's funny to think about that record, because you know, I listened to all the takes, and I was, in those days, I wanted to hear every take, and the more I listened, the more horrible I thought it was. And I remember when the final cut was made, I remember playing it to Booth and saying, you know, can this come out as a record? I hate it. I mean, I really, really hated it, and thought it was not good enough, and nowhere near what I thought I could do. And then after I've heard people say what you say, and you know, now I like it. When I listen to it, I do. And it was of course an important step for me too, to learn how to prepare and how to function in the recording process, which is a frustrating one, because you do always have the possibility to do it one more time, and you know, as we know, music can always be better or change.
Yeah. So I want to go. So you started in, I guess, the London connection, and out of that concert, was that where the Birtwistle concerto was written, and Endless Parade? Did they all come from then, or was it a bit later?
No, that came very much from Elgar Howarth. He was, you know, he conducted Birtwistle all the time, and then he had played, I think in those days it were the cassette tapes, you know. So he had played, maybe from this record, I don't know what he played to Birtwistle, but he played a cassette tape to Birtwistle. And Birtwistle had a commission by Paul Sacher, the famous Paul Sacher in Zurich, who through the years commissioned Stravinsky and Bartók and Strauss. So in Birtwistle's head, then this idea was formed to write an endless parade with trumpet as the solo instrument. And so he says to Sacher, I want to write this trumpet piece. And Sacher said, well, for whom? Oh, there's this Swedish kid. And of course, Sacher says, no, I don't want any Swedish kids. You know, if it should be for Maurice Andre. No. Well, I don't want a trumpet piece, says Sacher. And then Birtwistle says, well, there's no piece then. So he stood up for his idea, and as a side effect, he stood up for me. But then the piece came about and turned out to be a real masterpiece by a mature, great composer, and that's something that hasn't happened so often in our world. And that was then the beginning, very much, of that I was taken seriously by you know, music life, mostly first in Britain, of course.
Because the Birtwistle, it's endured. I mean, I heard a broadcast of a performance I think you did even just last year, but I remember hearing it live in Birmingham when we were on tour with the Tonhalle, and it's a piece that, you know, it's as you say, it's a mature work by a proper composer, and it really it's there have been a few though when I think about it, because I also think of the Maxwell Davies concerto that you played when you came and played in Zurich when I was in the orchestra there. That's another masterwork.
Yeah,
maybe we'll jump around and talk a bit about these pieces that you've inspired. Tell us about the Maxwell Davies. How did that happen?
Well, that was not written for me, actually. I mean, I was playing, of course, the sonata, which is on that first record, that was written for Elgar Howarth. So it all goes in circle. And they were student friends, the three of them, Birtwistle, Maxwell Davies, and Elgar Howarth. And then when I had met Gary, I visited him in London, and he took me to see people at the BBC and blah 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 and talk, and I remember also seeing a producer at BBC, and at the time I was studying. Ed Tarr had given me and Reinhold the parts of the Zimmerman from 54, so I was practicing that, and I still hadn't played it, you know, and so we go up to see this producer at BBC, and then Gary Howarth says, "Oh, he can play the Zimmerman," and I looked a little bit like that, and then this producer looked, "The Zimmerman, what?" So, you know, sometimes a little friendly. Well, it wasn't a lie. I could play it, and then that, of course, became a hugely important piece. Also not written for me.
Another one I heard you play live in Basel, an amazing. I mean, I feel like, I've heard a lot of Zimmerman as well.
So the Maxwell Davies, so Gary took me to meet Max, and then he reveals that, well, you know, I've actually just written, or I'm just writing, or just written a piece for John Wallis and the Philharmonia, a big concerto. So we think, oh, well, but then it was kind of agreed that I would get it, because very often there is exclusivity to these pieces. And, but I got to play it quite soon and also record it. I think maybe I did the first recording, I don't know. Not some, doesn't matter, but what mattered was that I did that record, which had Birtwistle, Maxwell Davies, and Blake Watkins
exactly
on it, which was also kind of a statement. I mean, it was even a statement from me towards Philips, the record company, because they said, "Well, you must do a trumpet and organ record." And I said, "Well, do I have to? I'm not so keen on trumpet and organ." And then I said, "Well, if I can do a record with the three modern British concertos, then I'll do a trumpet and organ." And then they found Simon Preston to play with, who was fantastic. So that was absolutely great fun too. But yeah, there are those pieces where you can, I mean, Birtwistle now being 35 years or so, you can really tell. I mean, now time has had its chance to, and it stands there like Stonehenge. I mean, it's absolutely timeless. When I played it only a couple of weeks ago with the Bayerische Rundfunk, and you know, them enjoying it. I mean, that feels like a victory for me too. When I was traveling around with these pieces in the beginning, you know, orchestras would complain and say it's unplayable, they wouldn't necessarily like it, and I had to spend so much energy selling it. And now, you know, they eat it up and they see it for the greatness it has, and it doesn't feel at all dusty, or from, you know, certain music you can say, well, that was a time or that was a fashion, but this one is really, you know, it will be there forever.
I guess that brings me to a good question. Which of, because you've, I mean, so many pieces that you've championed and premiered, which do you think of the repertoire that which are the ones that you think are the real masterworks? Maybe not even the ones that you like. I mean, Zimmerman is going to be on that list for sure, but which pieces do you think of the modern, the repertoire? If we can find enough people to play them.
That will happen. You know, yeah. I mean, we did a masterclass a few years ago at the Royal College in London, where a wonderful luxury because we did a masterclass with orchestra.
Wow.
So we had it was Royal College, Royal Academy, and Royal Northern College. Each chose one player, and one prepared Birtwistle, one Maxwell Davies, and one the Turnage. And I did a masterclass on those three pieces with orchestra, which was absolute fun. But so there were three students, because they were told and pushed to do this, they prepared it, and it was no problem. They absolutely played them. So it's definitely not impossible, these things. And I would say, to answer your question, I mean, it's hard. That would be a little bit like choosing,
betraying old friends.
Yeah, or choosing amongst your children, but at least time has proven Birtwistle already. Zimmerman, as you say, Max, not written for me, great big concerto, and almost in a sort of romantic sense of the concerto. It's almost like a Sibelius, it's all got all those nature descriptions and anyway. Then I'm pretty sure, even if it's not a concerto, but of the historic importance of the Henze.
Absolutely. Another one I heard you play in Malmö.
Yeah, I remember, vividly sitting there at the because you don't play in all the movements.
Exactly.
And at the world premiere in Cologne, and really thinking this is so strong, and this is absolutely history. That one. And for sure, H.K. Gruber, Ariel, and I would say it's newer, but I'm pretty sure about your compatriot Brett Dean as well. Dramatis Personae, that's a tremendous piece.
Brett, I like Brett's a good friend of mine. I was excited when I saw that he was writing that piece for you. It says. So where did you premiere that? Was it in Sydney? No, where was the?
No, the premiere was actually in Grafenegg in Austria, and then I think second performance was Danish radio, but Grafenegg was
okay.
Was premiere, yeah. But it's been played a lot, and also. Some like Concerto Gabao, the same thing. You get you feel that. You feel when the musicians, even if it has great difficulty and it challenges, but you can feel when great musicians enjoy it, and there's so many. It's absolutely heard music. I mean, if Brett is a very good example of that. He can listen to a rehearsal, and he can come in and say, "Oh, that this should be F sharp there." It's got chamber music aspects, it's got great drama, and that's another great piece.
And Brett is also, if you can say, he's a musician's composer. I mean, he's composer. He writes so idiomatically for all of the instruments.
Yeah, I mean, look back in history, the composers who have been involved in music making are very often, with few exceptions, but very few, it's the ones that are also musicians. Bach was every day he had his hands in the clay, and Bartok, Stravinsky, they were all also performer.
Yeah, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, all of them. That's true.
Absolutely, and I think of the ones I tend to like. Well, Birtwistle doesn't do too much of performance, but all the others we have mentioned have also been involved in performing quite a lot.
Yeah. I want to pivot now, and I don't know whether you want to talk about that. I want to talk about your conducting career, because back in the day, I believe I remember you were saying, "Oh no, conducting, I'm not going to be." But now I've seen some. I mean, you have a connection with a few orchestras. Tell us about your conducting.
Well, it's a hobby, but I like it. I really like it. I mean, it's wonderful when you can when you can bring the life from a score and the thoughts of a composer and bring it first to an orchestra and then to an audience. I don't think it's so dramatic, you know. You always get the question, why do you stop? Especially from colleagues, you know. It's like you go over to the dark side. But I think it's a bit like when an actor decides to direct a play. You know, it's I've been looking at scores all my life, and it's also a sort of a guarantee that I can keep on making music even when my teeth fall out. So I don't think I will ever be. In a way, my answer is the same as before. I don't think I will become a career or repertoire conductor, if you like. You know, there's enough people doing that. But of course, with all my connections with composers, all my work with composers and scorers, I do feel I have a certain set of keys that I can help out, and I'm good at programming, and that's been in later years very much the privilege of conductors to do programming, and the power of conductors is much greater than it ever was in music history. So I'm just trying to get a bit of that power. No, it's the programming bit, and then also because in programming, you know, who is going to do those pieces that needs to be played because they fill a gap, or they, you know, if we play only the absolute ink still wet music, and then we don't play anything until Sibelius, we have a great big vacuum which makes the ink still wet music completely not to be understood by any audience at all. And we need to show that it's organic, and there's a lot of music that absolutely has to be played. I mean, I did a program here in Malmö a couple of years ago, which it was like an Austrian. It was a bit apocalyptic. It was the summer that had no clouds, as Stefan Zweig says in his book. You know, when the outbreak of the wars, there was both had summers without clouds, and 18 was a summer without clouds. And I was sitting here and thought, this needs to come out in a program. And we started with the Hummel concerto, absolutely no trouble, you know, all a party, and then Gruber's Charivari, which is where it starts in Strauss' Perpetuum mobile, which is similar feeling to Hummel, and then goes into his Charivari, that's where the monsters come out, the monsters in brown shirts, and it all goes very wrong. And so, and then after the break, Webern Passacaglia, and then Krennek Symphony No. 4, which is absolutely like Mahler, but that's gone completely kaput. So it's the old world, but you know, it's gone wrong. So that's the sort of, you know, the young upcoming conductor who wants a career, he's definitely not going to do Krennek Symphony No. 4. So that sort of responsibility that falls on luxury hobby conductors like myself.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful that you are in a position to do that, and also that you take that responsibility seriously. But you've always been like that. You've always had a sense of something more than just yourself. Obviously, something more than just yourself with the trumpet, and that makes me think of you as a teacher, because when you came to Sydney in the 80s, and I played for you at a masterclass, and it was an amazing. Correct.
Correct.
And you really, I think what you did to me was maybe what your teachers used to do. You said, you pushed and you pushed and you pushed it. Can it go a little bit faster? And then I kind of stumbled and just, oh, I guess not. And then when it was really a fun to play, like we were both playing and, you know, and that was great. But then the next day you said, oh, come to my, you were staying at the flat at the conservatorium and you spent about 2 hours with me. You showed me stamp. You said, I'll need to show you some other things that we don't have time for now. And you did them later. But just that, spending that time with me, and you know, I played some Tomasi and some Brandenburg, and that willingness to give, and which I was talking to another friend of ours, Dave Elton, and you did the same thing for him, and I know you did the same thing for Tristram, and I'm sure you've done it for many trumpet players over the years. But that sense, I think it's to me, it's a similar thing, that sense of responsibility, because you could have given me the masterclass and said, okay, or give me a quick lesson, but that sense of passing something on. And then luckily enough, that began, I consider it an apprenticeship with you, that I came and studied with you at the summer school in Umeå. And then for the next however many years, I just, wherever you were playing and I could get there, I would get there, hear the concert, have a lesson. Or when you were recording the Skalkottas in La Chaux-de-Fonds, do you remember I turned the pages for the, so any time that I could, but it was also your willingness to do that. And so that kind of brings me to want to talk a little bit about how you view your role as a teacher, because initially you weren't associated with a conservatorium, but then over the years you've developed, obviously in Malmö, where I was that first year, another part of my apprenticeship being your assistant, but also in England. So if you talk a little bit about your life as a teacher.
I always enjoyed teaching a lot. I mean, it almost takes more energy than performing. It's really a draining thing, but it's, I feel a need, you know. I mean, I always quote Thibaud when he said, you know, for the trumpet, one lifetime is not enough. And it's so true, you know. And if you don't take what you've been given and give it on to someone, and where you see that here it has a chance of you know, being fruitful. If I plant the thoughts here, it will happen. And I mean, it has so many benefits. You for yourself, on an egotistical point, you get to formulate your thoughts, and they can become more and more clear, and that will help me in my development. But also the fact that you actually do give it on, and it gives you a sense that it's, you know, it's for something more important. It's not a sport, what we do, you know. It's not to set records in how many concertos or how high or how fast or you know. So and to give into someone the sense of, here you have a piece of musical text, you know, see how much we can do with that, how many possibilities there are even in one bar of music when it comes to also, yeah, on so many levels. And so I always loved it. I love doing master classes when I travel. And I wanted to do something here in Malmö other than, you know, just live and be with my family. So I wanted to dig also here a little bit, and that the school became, of course, a way of doing that. And yeah, it's been many over the years, and it's, you know, sometimes, I mean, it's really gratifying. For a while, I got even a bit fed up with hearing myself in master classes, and I remember for a while I stopped, and I think it was actually in Australia, someone came up to me and said, oh, I played for you in the masterclass many years ago, and I was about to stop playing the trumpet, but that masterclass made me continue, and now I have a job in that orchestra, and that's so heartwarming when you hear stories like that. And I do love teaching. I don't consider myself, because I had such great teachers. I mean, someone like Tom Stevens was so intelligent as a teacher, so smart in that he never gave any answers. He just put questions to your head that made you think, and he took your mind on the most clever routes that would make you develop. I mean, that's much more clever than I do. I bombard the poor person like yourself with answers and
questions and questions.
Yeah, and questions. Yeah, I try to also put questions, but and I do. It's also, I mean, it is sometimes tough on a personal, because you end up provoking the person.
Definitely. The word that comes to my mind is transformational. And it's interesting because Dave was around here the other day, and he said that learning from you was transformational. It obviously was for me as well. And at the moment, I'm a maths teacher, and I'm kind of in leadership in maths. And we talk about this difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership. And transactional leadership, there's an exchange. You do this, I'll do that. You'll get this, I'll get that. Transformational is when it's for the greater good, when it's going to lead to something more. And everything that you've been saying about your role as a conductor to be transformational for the public, or also for the whole understanding of music, being, using big words, but that's transformational. And your effect on your students is also definitely transformational. And I would say 40 years going around playing these pieces, transformational on the concept of what the trumpet can be. The fact that you can now go and play in these orchestras, and it's a Selbstverständlichkeit. It's a given that there's you can go and play with the Bayerischer Rundfunk, not as a competition winner, but just as an invited soloist, or that you can go and play in Vienna or in Amsterdam or all over the States. So that's transformational as well. Yeah. I mean, that one, and also it shows that the world actually doesn't only get worse. Some things do. I mean, the Birtwistle is a good example. I played it when it was very new with that same orchestra, the Bayerischer Rundfunk, and I remember them physically almost refusing. There was a leader sitting with his legs crossed and really describing how horrible he thought his life was, and then now 35 years later come back and see an orchestra loving it. And I remember I wrote a little text to my agent Cornelia Schmidt in Germany, who was there that first time, and she remembered me in tears after the first rehearsal. And then I said, well, some things actually change for the better, and she said, well, you should feel part of that, and a big part of that.
I do
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I have a few more topics in mind, but I think it would be remiss for us to be together and not to talk about Ed. I would like, because Ed, of my teachers that I can interview my teachers, I can't interview Ed because we lost him last year. And I know that Ed was an influence on you, a huge influence on me. So I just thought it would be nice to talk about Ed for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, first let me, your idea of talking to your teachers, keep doing it, because I for a long time had an idea of a book, actually, because I consider all the books of exercises, we already have them. It's not what we practice, it's how we practice it. So I don't think a single book of exercises need to be written, but a book of exactly the idea that you have, so from your point of view, and then their point of view towards you, that is a very interesting aspect that I would have liked to do, but that's
I would have loved to hear what Thibaud said about you as well. That would have been
absolutely, yes. And so Ed was, of course, I mean, he was not one of my main teachers, but he was the first big time trumpet player that I got to meet. I was very, very young, and Bo Nilsson was playing in Ed's ensemble. So Ed would come here and do like a summer course, and they were pals. So I got to meet Ed first time. I think I cannot have been more than about 10 years old or something like that. And he was, of course, you know, he was a big star, and he had all this knowledge, and he had this very civilized air about him. You know, the way he spoke, and
I just want to say, we used to joke about, you would be with Ed and he would say, "Shall we take off our jackets?" That kind of, we used to joke about that was, you know, Ed had some serious class about him. Anyway, keep going.
Absolutely. So he was always an influence, and I think seriously, I mean, when I was very young, there were different routes it could have gone. I was saving money on something called the America Bank Book, because I was going to go to Chicago and study and become a trumpet player, you know. But then Ed, that whole thing with Ed started, and the natural trumpet, and Bo was playing in that, and I thought for a long time, you know, that could be interesting, you know, the natural trumpet, Baroque music. I remember seeing their ensemble in Montreux, which must have been in 75 or 6 or something like that. And Mark Ulrich was playing also in the ensemble. And he was, you know, he wasn't so much older than me. And there was this cool cat playing in the ensemble. And I thought, oh, that would be something to do. But then talk of transformational, I mean, then I met Thibaud, and then everything just changed away from that. Not because he said that it should, I have to point out, you know, he never said you have to go this direction or this or this. He let me very free artistically, but anyway, it was clear I was not going to do that. But I had contact with Ed all through, and I went to Basel, and just at the end of Paris, I think, because I wanted to play Michael Haydn number 2, because I liked that piece, and I thought, well, that most people don't play that in public. It would be a good thing if I could play that in public, because it's a nice piece too. So I studied that with Ed, and there was the Zimmerman, and he was always great. He was always on the juries of the competitions. So, and he always had intelligent advice, and he became a friend. And he also invited me to play with him and Irmy on little tours of northern Germany in the churches there, you know. So sort of circus life a little bit. Really nice. And he taught me how to smoke cigars and drink whiskey and all those important things in life.
Ed always talked about you very, very fondly when I was studying with him, and Ed, yeah, definitely. I want to just a little pause onto Michael Haydn's second concerto, because when I came to play for you in Umeå, I could almost play it, but not quite. And I was just so, I think I even faxed you the program when I finally did it in Lausanne with a Lausanne Chamber Orchestra. And that was also the part of your effect of making impossible things possible, because it seems like it shouldn't really be possible, and it wasn't at first for me, but then that feeling of, I was so proud that concert where I played Malta 1 and Michael Haydn 2. I said, oh, I've got to fax Håkan the program. Back in the days when faxes were a thing, and I faxed you the program. I was so proud of myself for doing that, just when you mentioned Michael Haydn. Yeah.
And you were, honestly, I mean, you were one of the first proofs that none of this is impossible. And people, if there are anybody out there who thinks that I could do all these things from start or from day one, I mean, that would be the biggest misconception. I mean, I thought of them just as being just as impossible as everybody else. But some mountains just had to be climbed, because otherwise the trumpet would not get there. I mean, it was obvious that the Zimmerman had to be played. And it was obvious that it was important to show, if there was pieces other than transcriptions that had quality, like Michael Haydn No. 2, it was important to show that those things are there as part of building something. And from day one, I understood that you could do that.
I think what I'm thinking, you've been a bit like the 4-minute mile. You've been the guy who did that 4-minute mile, and then not all of a sudden, but when I think of Zimmerman, it has become people played in student recitals and orchestral first trumpet players play. I know Bollage played it in Frankfurt and Tristram played it in Australia. It has become possible through people doing it. So I think that that's another part of the transformation of what's possible. But yeah, I still think some of the things you've done are a bit impossible, but that's, that's, I reserve the right to think that. And I do want to, I want to talk about Charlier. I can't, all of the trumpet players who've been following your Charlier would not forgive me to have you here and not talk about that experience. You're up to 21 now, I think, or have you already recorded 22?
Yeah, 22 and 23 are recorded, yeah.
Yeah, so 21 came out this week. And what's that been like for you? And I think that this is a good time to go beyond the trumpet, because the Charlier thing, it's not just about the trumpet. It's been about your response. Yeah. So,
I mean, when this started, I didn't want to get out of bed. I've been doing it for 40 years, and the motivation to keep practicing as much as it takes is a challenge on its own, even without any virus. So when this happened, it was a terrible blow, really. And I thought desperately what to do. And then I thought about the Charlier, and I thought, I mean, you might remember, I would always, if I took some time off and wanting to get back, I would always take up the Charlier because of its musical challenge, and because it's not only one line. There is always a suggested second or third line, and it really is the closest we have to unaccompanied quality traditional music. I mean, we have some modern pieces, but this is something else. And so that's when I had the idea. I was also, already in the beginning, we started to see all wonderful musicians with headsets with their computer and playing, and I didn't want to do that. Not that I don't respect it, but so when Malmö Live, the hall, suggested, well, come and do it here. We'll give you the tools to do it. And I was very thankful, because also it gave me now and then this second instrument that we talked about with the Berlin Philharmonie, the big hall. So to go and play there rather than here in my room. And then these pieces, and to look at them again and again and again and again, and see that there are so many possibilities, and they bring in very much what all my teachers were about. So it brings me back to a youthful thinking, but also it can add now in my playing stories and knowledge that I have acquired over the years. So I sometimes get very tired of seeing myself and only myself doing them. I heard a funny quote yesterday. When you're a kid, you do ugly faces to the mirror, and at this time in life, the mirror gets its own back and takes its revenge. and that's what I sometimes feel with the Charlier. Who wants to see these old guys, doing his etudes? But and then I find them. I mean, they have sometimes even Chopin or Debussy-like qualities to them. So they are in a way fulfilling. But of course, playing with other people is still much nicer.
That's true, but I mean, I'm sure you felt that when they come out, especially, I mean, now it's an excitement because they're not every week, but when you were bringing them out every week last year, when really most of the world, I mean, a lot of the world was shut down. So they were a real, a source of inspiration. And, you know, it was, I mean, you went for about at least 13 or 14 weeks in a row, or even more, where it was every week. It would be Monday, it would come out, and you could tell on the YouTube channel, and especially Jens. Have you seen? Have you seen on the YouTube channel Jens Lindeman's comments?
I did see. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a very social media guy, so I tend not to look too much on those things. But I did see Jens, and
he goes in all caps every week. He writes it in all caps, so it's shouting. Everybody needs to look at, like, they're pretty funny. And maybe I hope that Jens, I hope you see this, and you'll notice that your full caps comments on the chalet have been noticed and respected.
No, I've certainly felt, you know, I felt the love. I have, you know, so that's nice. And you know, I see it. It's a way of also giving back. I mean, the trumpet has given me so much. You know, it's a little bit of giving back. And one of the most touching, there's two kids in New Zealand, where I think the teacher had sort of made a 2-voice version of just a little bit of the second etude. And there were these 2 kids, maybe 10, 12-year-olds, playing that. I mean, that brought tears to my eyes, I have to say.
Yeah. Wow. Håkan, it's been just so delightful talking to you. And I think it's clear to everyone. I think because I try and think of the word to describe this interview and my feeling, and I think transformational is a really good word. And I like things that are multi-level. I like things that are, you know, as you know, I'm kind of a complex person. I like things that are not just one thing or 2 things or 3 things. So transformational on our individual level, transformational for trumpet players, transformational for music, and I think transformational is a good word to describe how I felt about you. And because that I don't know if I've even articulated the reason I wanted to do this. I wanted to just show my gratitude, and I've just been amazed at my teachers. I never took it for granted, but that I started learning from Dan, and then I had Paul and Cliff and Ed and Mark and you and other people that I've had less lessons from. I've been so lucky in that. And I guess now that I'm playing again, right? So I'm actually.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I mean, I always consider it one of the greater losses to the trumpet world that you stopped. But you know, with your kind of gifts, you can do what you want.
Well, that's kind. I've been very lucky, and I think the title of this whole series is Wenn schon denn schon, but the idea of just my gratitude. And so to finish, I just want to just say, Håkan, just a huge gratitude, not just for this interview, but just for being such a massive positive influence on my life. So I feel like, I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And anyone who in the first lessons, when we play Albersberger, we start to talk about Dostoevsky. I mean, then you know that you're on several levels at the same time. And that
that's it. Perfect. So I'm gonna I'll just say thank you, and I'll say bye to the audience. I'm gonna do that.